Well, at this time, I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Meridian Planning and Zoning meeting for the date of April 16th, and let's start with roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Seal?
Here.
Commissioner McCarville?
Here.
Commissioner Pitzer?
Here.
Commissioner Grove?
Here.
Commissioner Casanelli? Now you're on mute. Please unmute.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Fitzgerald?
Here. Thank you, ma'am. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. We don't have any changes to the agenda tonight, so can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda: the approval of minutes for the April 2nd, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and the findings and facts and conclusions of law for hidden gem events, H 2020-0015. Anything need to be pulled out of there? Hearing none. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. Okay, so let me go through. Well, welcome all who's join us online during this time as we're trying to get the city's work done while we're all in stay-at-home situation. So we appreciate you being with us tonight. We are bringing this to you via Zoom and online via YouTube. So let me kind of walk through how we're going to do this tonight. On your screen, you should see the commissioners who are present for this evening's meeting. Also on the call are our staff, the city attorney, the city clerk's office, and the staff for our planning department who will be on the call. Everyone else that is online for Zoom are attendees. You may observe the meeting and we can see that you are there. However, your ability to talk will be muted until such time as we open the public hearing for you to provide testimony. If you've previously sent a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed on the screen. The clerk will run the presentation for you. The clerk is also assisted with bringing up slides for other presentations. So if you have something that's missing, please ask us and we'll get you squared away. If you simply want to watch the meeting, we encourage you to watch through the streaming live, the city's YouTube channel. You can access that through meridiancity.org/live, where that's being squared away live on our website. When public testimony is open, the clerk will call the names of those who signed up to testify on our website, and you'll be unmuted. The chair will call on you individually. Please state your name and your address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. After that, we may ask your questions for clarification. And then once done, you'll be put back on mute and we'll go on with the rest of the meeting. Once all those who have signed up in advance or have called in, I will invite any others who wish to testify. If you do wish to testify via Zoom, you may press the raise the hand button, which is in the participants down on the bottom of the Zoom app. There's a participants line down there. You can see there's a raise your hand button. And if you're only listening or calling through a cell phone or landline, you can press *9 and that'll give you the ability to talk. If you're listening on multiple devices, please choose one and then mute everything else so we don't get reverberation. And make sure that you're we'll give you some feedback if there's any challenges. I think I've seen the governor went through this during a stay-at-home order and I felt a little bit bad for him, but we're all working through it during this time and using new technology. So please know that we cannot take questions after the public testimony portion. That's our time to deliberate. So we want to make sure that we close the public hearing. And if there's questions, we can call you up specifically, but we won't have additional questions after we close the public hearing. So with that, let's get started with our fun and exciting evening. I know one other thing, if there is an HOA representative, which I think we have one for the Delano subdivision, we will give you some additional time to speak. We usually have hands raised on those you'll be speaking on behalf of, but because there is not that ability tonight, we're going to give you some extra time to speak on behalf of the HOA, and then we'll move on. But with that, commissioners, are there any questions on how we're going to proceed? Hopefully we worked on the kinks in the last round, and I appreciate all the staff's efforts to do that. Anybody have any questions? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to open up the first presentation and hand it over to Kayla. I'm sorry. I think it's not Cameron. I think you're going to kick us off. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct, Mr. Commissioner and Chairman. Yep.
Cameron, we can barely hear you.
Okay. Is that better, Mr. Chairman?
A little bit. Does everybody hear him?
Is that
Yeah, I
better?
can hear Mo.
Yeah,
That's better.
You're good, Cameron. Thank you. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening, and certainly appreciate all of your efforts and willingness to serve too. Just from my standpoint, I just really appreciate the commission and your willingness to keep things moving in the city, albeit under these circumstances in a unique way. So let me just express first off my appreciation to each of you for your service. This item before you this evening is long time coming. I think is fair to say. The city and the Meridian Development Corporation, as you know, have been working in close concert to accomplish a lot of key goals and strategic initiatives within the city's downtown in particular. A lot of those things pertain to the city's strategic plan, comprehensive plan, which is specific to you all this evening, as well as MDC's Destination Downtown revitalization plan. So what will be presented to you this evening is a culmination of many years, if you will, to move our downtown forward in a meaningful way. So that really is the genesis of the proposal. So as you may know, the current downtown urban renewal district is scheduled to sunset in 6 years. Because of that shorter time frame and the way that urban renewal works with boundaries being set, the process to go through to establish these districts, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. And so that really with this, what's being proposed this evening, which is a de-annexation of a portion of that, of the existing district, and then creating a new district, what we're calling the Union District in its place, will effectively extend or create a new time horizon for those specific properties. Now, it's important to note that this new district can greatly benefit from some focus, some tender loving care, if you will. As you know, there's sidewalk issues, lighting, sewer and water infrastructure, road infrastructure needs, just to name a few that we are looking to really take a hard look at and move forward. So that just kind of gives you a taste for what you'll be looking at and the background and reason for it. It's important to note as well that we do have our consultants on the phone with us as well. We have Phil Kushlin, our urban renewal consultant, as well as Megan Conrad, who is our urban renewal attorney, on the phone with us as well to speak to any questions you may have on the technical side. It is also important to note that this is just a step in our process. So we have gone through the first phases of this, which included an eligibility assessment that was reviewed and approved by both the City Council as well as the MDC board. And really the purpose of that is to determine, are the properties eligible for urban renewal? And under the code, there's 10 specific criteria. These properties in this new proposed site met 8 of those 10. Granted, you only need to meet 1 to, under the strict review of the code to be eligible. Therefore, both the City Council and MDC board found that this does make sense to move forward with this plan. So bringing it current now to you all is really what you're looking at is the land use piece of this. Does this proposed de-annexation and new urban renewal plan adhere to our comprehensive plan? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caleb Hood, as you know, is our planning manager, and who conducted a staff review of the comp plan and how this plan compares to it. So I'll turn that over to Caleb now.
Thank you, Cameron. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I trust you can hear me okay. Wave your hand or something if you can't. Okay. So thanks again, Cameron. So yeah, as Cameron just mentioned, Brian McClure in my office and myself did review the Union District Plan for conformity to the city's comprehensive plan. I put it in my memo that you have in your packet. You know, if we were all at City Hall together, we'd probably spend a little more time kind of walking you through those policies. But we thought we did a pretty comprehensive job just in that memo covering all the policies related to downtown. As with most development projects, not all comprehensive plan policies apply to each project. It's very, very rare that you'll see a project that hits all of the goals, objectives, and action items that you're trying to accomplish for an area. But we did look at the proposed project area, the redevelopment actions, and the uses explained in there, and evaluated those against the comprehensive plan policies relative to downtown, and put that analysis in the memo. So unless you want me to, I'm not prepared to walk through each one of those. We did, again, analyze that, do believe that the plan is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And we do recommend that you affirm the two resolutions that are the next two action items on your agenda this evening. So if you have any questions about how we got to, or the analysis we did within the staff memo, I'd certainly stand for any of those questions. But we really did just zero in on, again, the area called out and the actions anticipated with the plan. So with that, Mr. Chair, pretty simple report this evening. Would stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Caleb. Are there any questions for Caleb or Cameron?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Seal.
just in looking at this and some of the intent language that's in there as far as what it's trying to accomplish, why isn't the area bigger?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, Cameron, if you're still on the line, it's probably I have not been actively involved in the creation of the boundaries of this area. So if Cameron or someone else maybe on the line could answer how they came up with the boundaries, that's probably better than for me to answer.
Sure, you got it, Caleb. Appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Seal. Great question. There was actually a lot of discussion around, should we make this bigger? Should we take a bigger stab? Or should we have it be a more focused district? And really, it kind of came down to, this is a specific piece that we feel needed that specific attention. And, with what's being proposed, as you may know, with these sites, both not to get too project specific, because again, that's not what we're debating this evening, but there is an immediate need for that. And so we wanted to adhere to the strict, interpretation of urban renewal law, which is, let's pick a site and let's redevelop it and use that, the tool to make that happen. So there was a lot of deliberation that went into this, and that's how we landed on this these particular parcels.
Thanks, Cameron. Additional questions for either Cameron or Caleb? I appreciate the kind of strict following of the urban renewal side. I hear that a great deal at the legislature about things are pushing the limits of urban renewal. So we greatly appreciate the staff taking that into account and using the letter of that law to move forward with. So thank you for that. I did want to bring up to the commission before we move forward and put it on the record that my wife serves on the MDC board. I don't feel like that impacts my ability to move or vote on this resolution, but I will leave that up to my fellow commissioners. They may have a problem with us doing double duty in regards to her serving on MDC.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Holland.
I don't see any concerns if you think you could be impartial.
Okay.
I concur.
I'm fine.
Perfect. Okay. So in moving that forward, we have two resolutions in front of us to take kind of the next step in this process. Are there any questions for legal counsel or for Caleb or Cameron about these specific resolutions we're going to vote on? One's validating the conformity of that revitalization plan. I believe the other one is the de-annexation piece. If I'm not mistaken, and I can't pull it up in front of me right now.
Yep,
Any
that's
questions
correct,
for the
Mr.
team?
Chairman.
Go right ahead, Cameron.
No, I was just confirming your comment. That is correct. So you have the de-annexation and then the new district plan before you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Holland.
one more question for Cameron, or maybe even legal counsel. So if you de-annex the piece from the existing urban renewal agency, does it reset your allocation area for your increment?
Mr. Chairman, Lisa, that is correct. So that goes right along with the time horizon as well. So effectively, we would be able to use the tax increment for the full new time frame, as opposed to just the 6-year time frame remaining.
Got it. Okay.
Like a person who deals with city stuff all the time. Good job, Commissioner Holland.
I was gonna say, I know a fair amount about urban renewal districts these days, so I think I don't really have any big concerns with it. My only question was the same one asked earlier of why not consider a little bit bigger of an area for long term. If you plan to open up a district for 20 years, is there more we want to accomplish? But I appreciate the sentiment of trying to follow the intent of urban renewal to do one project area at a time. And if you can get done what you need to get done with, close it and start a new one, because that's the point of the tool. So no concerns otherwise on my side.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Steele, go right ahead.
Just one question on one of the concerns raised was that, I mean, and it was with art, some of the depiction of art or picking what art is going to be there as far as different entities having the ability to do that within these districts. How is that going to be mitigated going into this as far, and that's just a piece of it. I'm sure there's other parts that are going to face that that same issue. Is there something that will be happening with this in order to kind of lay the groundwork for other districts like this that will come into Meridian as we move forward with things like this? Because I'd imagine that this is going to be a stepped approach where this is going to be a piece, and then they'll identify another piece. So we want to make sure that there's commonality and flow, and we're all marching to the same beat.
Caleb, I had a similar question. Do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I believe I can, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Seal. So I understand today. So that was one of the concerns when we put this together, was stepping on toes, basically, and just an acknowledgement that the city does have an arts commission. So if public art is going to be a piece of what happens in this area, that there be communication and coordination with other entities that are out there, and so there isn't stepping on toes and increased coordination on those types of activities and projects. It's my understanding that and I might not get the terminology right, but there's been an addendum to the plan, an understanding in the plan anyways, that there will be that coordination going forward. and it will be coordinated with our Arts Commission, amongst other, maybe there is historic preservation for other projects and those types of things. So I think that's well understood that just we need to work together on projects to make sure we're not working cross purposes.
Commissioner Seal, did you have any follow-up there?
No, thank you.
Perfect.
Mr. Chair, just one comment too. So in the process that they're going through, because again, I've done a lot of research on how urban renewal districts are formed lately. They'll have to still come back with a district plan of what they hope to accomplish within that, and that'll come back forward. So a lot of the things of what specific elements are they going to accomplish and how are they going to accomplish them will come back before us again in the future.
And that'll be a public hearing, much to Commissioner Seal's email earlier today. I think that'll give us an opportunity to see those and have a public hearing around that information.
Okay, good.
So if we take these in order, unless there's other questions, can I get a motion to approve resolution PZ 20-01 regarding validating conformity of the First Amendment to the Meridian Revitalization Plan?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Holland.
the way that staff posed it in here, can we make a motion to approve both resolutions together, or do we need to do those as separate motions?
This is
Andrea?
Andrea. Legal, you can do it either way. So staff proposed a combination motion, but it doesn't have to be done that way. It's your choice.
I'm good either way. So if we're good, I'm good with handling it however you want to make the motion.
I think I'm fairly comfortable with what both of the motions are trying to accomplish. So I'm going to make a motion to combine them together.
Perfect.
After considering all staff, applicant, and input, I move to approve resolution numbers PZ 20-01 and PZ 20-02 as presented today in the staff report and the planning and zoning hearing.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution PZ 20-01 and PZ 20-02. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Bill, was that or Commissioner Casanelli, was that an aye? That you're good?
That was an aye.
Thank you, sir.
I'm good.
Okay, motion passes, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Cameron and Caleb. We appreciate your guidance and information. We look forward to seeing the plans as they come back forward.
Thank you, commissioners.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on in the hearing, we're going to reopen the public hearing for, I guess it's maybe continued, or actually it's remanded back. So the public hearing for Delano subdivision, H 2019-0027. And just for staff, for Commissioner Grove and Commissioner Pitzer, this is, we've seen this one several times. And so it's come back before us for reasons I think Sonia will get into. But Commissioner Pitzer, did you have something you needed to chat with the commission about, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to advise the commission that I live in an adjoining subdivision of the proposed Delano sub. Prior to my appointment, I attended neighborhood meetings. I attended the P&Z and the city council meeting in which I testified at those hearings. Since my appointment, I have abstained from any other meetings or any conversations surrounding this application, and any emails that I had received after my appointment have been placed in the public record. I feel I can be open, objective, and impartial, and will consider all evidence and testimony with an open mind. However, if my fellow commissioners do not agree, I will understand completely and will respectfully recuse myself.
Thank you. Is there any comments from or questions from fellow commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hall.
I don't think I have any concerns as long as she can be impartial, but I would look to legal for their input if we need to worry about it.
This is Andrea. Commissioner Pitzer did consult with legal, and we advised her if she wanted to do exactly what she did, and felt she could be impartial and objective and keep an open mind through the hearing, that she could go forward if she so chose and your body agreed.
Commissioner Pitzer, we really appreciate your providing us all the documentation and emails that you've gotten, so we could be on the same page. It just allows us to have the same amount of information that you've gotten as well. So I feel comfortable that you can stand and be objective in the discussion. So I have no problem. Does anyone else have any concerns?
None.
Okay.
No.
Perfect.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Casanelli.
Yeah, I want to just kind of add on that. There were some emails that I sent out with some questions, HD, and I just want to make clear that the questions I had, they were questions and don't reflect any partiality I may have. I can certainly remain impartial. I just wanted to throw that out and address that because I did ask some questions.
But I think all the commissioners were on those emails, or we received them. So I think we're all, and they were posed in a question format and not in an opinion format. So I think we're good there unless there's concerns among the commission.
Mr. Chair, I believe they were also added to the public record, so anyone has
Yeah.
access to that chain.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that information, Commissioner Casanelli. Any other concerns out there? Okay. I will turn it over to Sonia to kick us off. You want to start this up with a staff report, ma'am? If you have to unmute yourself though.
Oh, I think I'm unmuted now. Are we good?
You're good. Go for it.
I think the clerk is controlling that. So, anywho, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The applications before you are a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site consists of 15.21 acres of land. It's zoned RUT in Ada County, and it's located at 2800 and 14120 West Jasmine Lane. This project was originally heard by the commission last year, back in May 2nd, July 18th. At the hearing on July 18th, the commission voted to recommend denial of the project to City Council. The council heard the project on November 12th and voted to remand the project back to the commission to address the density issue of the proposed development and for commission's review of a revised plat with changes to lots along the northern boundary of the subdivision that front on East Della Street, consisting of single-story detached homes and the loss of one buildable lot. The revised plans before you tonight are the result of discussions at the City Council hearings and meetings with the neighbors. The revisions include a reduction in the number of buildable lots from 85 to 66, a change to the proposed zoning. The portion of the site along the north and west boundaries previously proposed to be zoned R15 is now R8, and a change to the conceptual building elevations. Since the hearing at City Council in November, the city adopted a new comprehensive plan, which included an amendment to the future land use map that assigned an mixed use regional designation to the majority of the property that lies east of the proposed Center Point Way. Therefore, the previous application for an amendment to the future land use map is no longer needed and has been withdrawn. This area was formerly in the city of Boise's planning area, but last October, Boise City Council approved a resolution to amend the land use map of Blueprint Boise to transfer this area from Boise's area of city impact to the city of Meridian's area of city impact boundary, since Meridian is able to provide water and sewer services to the property. So that's the update and the background on this, and I'll just proceed forward with what's proposed with the current plan. Again, the comprehensive plan future land use map designation for the portion west of the proposed extension of Center Point is medium density residential, which calls for 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre, and mixed use regional on the east side of Center Point. The applicant is requesting annexation and zoning of 3.31 acres of land with R8 zoning for the portion of the site adjacent to the north and west boundaries, with R15 zoning of the 8.12 acres directly to the south and east of the R8 portion. The 5 acres on the east side of the proposed extension of Center Point Way is proposed to be zoned R40. The proposed zoning is consistent with the proposed development plan and the future land use map designations for this site. A preliminary plat is proposed consisting of 66 single-family residential building lots for the development of single-family residential detached homes at a gross density of 5.7 units per acre. One building lot is for a future 96-unit multifamily residential development for which a concept plan is depicted on the landscape plan at a gross density of 27 units per acre. Eight common lots are proposed and 2 other lots for common driveways on a total of 15.22 acres of land. The plat is proposed to develop in 3 phases. There is a phasing plan down on the screen on the bottom left. The first phase is on the west side of the proposed Centerpoint Way and will include the extension of North Dashwood Place at the north boundary through the site to Centerpoint Way. The second phase is on the west side of the development. And the third phase is the multifamily on the east side of Centerpoint. This plan, as I noted before, is conceptual and the use will require approval of the subsequent conditional use permit. Staff recommends North Centerpoint Way is extended to the north boundary of the site, along with construction of the street buffer and detached sidewalk on the east side of North Centerpoint Way with the first phase of development. This will allow the connection to Wainwright Drive to the north to occur sooner if the Wong property, which is the abutting property to the north, redevelops before the multifamily residential portion of the site develops. There have been many letters of testimony received from adjacent residential property owners to the north regarding the amount of traffic that will be generated from the proposed development and routed through their neighborhood. For this reason, it is imperative that the Centerpoint Way connection to Wainwright occur as soon as possible. The applicant did provide a concept drawing shown in the upper left, showing how development could possibly occur on the Wong parcel with the extension of Centerpoint to the north to the commercial area, eventually extending to Wainwright, consistent with the master street map in the location proposed on this site. If you'll go back one slide, Adrian, please. One access is proposed on either side of, back one more. On either side of Centerpoint Way, a collector street, and an emergency only pedestrian access is proposed from the extension of North Dashwood Place at the north boundary of the site. A stub street is proposed to the parcel to the west for access and future extension. Public streets are proposed within the single-family residential portion of the development with 27-foot wide street sections. Private drive aisles will be provided within the multifamily residential portion of the development. In accord with UDC 11-3A3, which limits access points to collector streets to improve safety and requires access to be taken from a local street if available, staff is recommending North Dashwood Place is extended as a full street section into the site with the first phase of development. And just a note, ACHD approved the connection of Dashwood Avenue to the existing stub street to the north, Dashwood Place, as a temporary emergency access and pedestrian connection until Centerpoint Way is extended to Wainwright Drive, or within 10 years, whichever occurs first. When Centerpoint Way is extended to Wainwright Drive, Dashwood Place will be reconstructed as a public street for vehicular connectivity to Wainwright Drive. UDC, actually, let me have you go back, I believe, one slide, please, Adrian. Yes. UDC 11-3A3 requires all subdivisions to provide local street access to any use that currently takes direct access from an arterial or collector street. The parcel to the east of the property proposed to be rezoned R40 on the east side of Centerpoint, and that is the one on the drawing on the lower right-hand side with the property with the star on it. That's just off-site. Again, they currently take access from State Highway 69, Eagle Road. It's an arterial street and a state highway. Staff recommends that local street access or a driveway with a cross access easement is provided to the property to the east as set forth in the UDC. The applicant should coordinate with the developer of that property on a location for the access street or driveway. And then if you'll go next. Right there, thank you. 27-foot wide street sections are proposed, which only allow parking on one side of the street. A parking plan was submitted that, as shown, that demonstrates the amount of available on-street parking, which is 58 spaces, as well as the location of such spaces. And then again, there are, of course, off-street parking spaces provided for each home in accord with UDC standards as well. A 20-foot wide landscape street buffer is required along Centerpoint Way, a collector street. A minimum of 10% qualified open space is required to be provided for the overall development, along with one side amenity. The applicant is proposing 10.8% on the single family portion of the site, consisting of a 0.69 acre park with amenities, parkways, linear open space, and a collector street buffer. Because the multifamily residential portion of the site is separated from the single family portion by a collector street, and the development plan is conceptual at this time, staff is recommending as a DA provision that the 10% open space is provided on that portion of the site at the time of development, in addition to the open space required in the specific use standards for multifamily residential developments. A shade structure, children's play structure, climbing dome, climbing boulders, seating benches, and public art are proposed as qualified amenities for the site, which do exceed UDC standards. The north lateral runs along the northern boundary of the site and is piped. An easement should be depicted on the plat for the waterway if one exists. Staff is unsure. If there is an easement and the width is 10 feet or greater, it should be located within a common lot that is a minimum 20 feet wide and outside of a fenced area, unless otherwise modified by City Council. The elevations shown are the original elevations here that were submitted with the application. Since that time, the applicant has submitted new concept building elevations for the single family residential detached homes as shown. All single family homes along the west and north perimeter boundaries of the development are restricted to a single story in height as proposed by the applicant previously. The concept elevations for the apartments did not change. There have been many letters of written testimony submitted on this application on both the original and the revised plans from the public, and those are all contained in the public record for reference. Keith Clark, the applicant's representative, submitted a response to the most recent staff report. He is in agreement with the staff report conditions except for two items as follows. He was requesting a modification to development agreement provision 1D, as in David, to not restrict the homes along the west boundary of the subdivision to a single story as previously proposed, to allow two-story homes to be constructed. And deletion of condition number 2B as in boy, which requires construction of the 20-foot wide street buffer and detached sidewalk along the east side of Centerpoint to be constructed with the first phase of development to be deferred until the multifamily portion of the site develops. They are in agreement with the extension of Centerpoint as a full street section to the north boundary of the property. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed project with the requirement of a development agreement per the provisions in the staff report. The staff will stand for any questions.
Thanks, Sonia. Are there questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Holt.
Sonia, can you tell us again what the number was for that second condition they wanted struck from the staff report?
Yeah, it is in your hearing outline under written testimony. It is condition number 2B, as in boy.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli, go right ahead, sir.
Sonia, can you just go over the connection to Dashwood again so that I'm clear on that?
Staff is recommending that it's extended to Centerpoint with the first phase of development.
Dashwood, the connection to Dashwood.
Yes. Staff is recommending that it's extended from the north boundary to Center Point Way with the first phase of development.
Okay, and then what happens? And then eventually it becomes just a emergency access and pedestrian?
No, staff, it is a public stub street, which was intended to be extended with development. City code requires that all stub streets be extended.
Additional questions?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Seal.
just a question on the north lateral. The question on that, where if that needs to be a 20-foot wide outside of a fenced area in a common lot, is that going to fit in their plat that's shown here, or how? I mean, is that basically something that they're going to have to figure out how to do?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I have asked the applicant about that. As I recall, I never received an answer on whether an easement exists for the north lateral or not. So that would be a good question for the applicant. And yes, I think that it would significantly affect their plat if a 20-foot wide common lot was required. But yeah, the applicant should respond to that question.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Castelli, did you have a follow-up, sir? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm when I'm reading the summary here, I'm just not clear on that. It's saying that ACHD approved the connection of Dashwood to the existing substreet to the north as a temporary emergency access pedestrian connection until Center Point Way is extended to Wainwright or within 10 years. So I guess I'm confused on that.
You have, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Commissioner Casanelli, commissioners, you have two different jurisdictions with different requirements. Our city code requires that it be extended. ACHD has taken a more lenient approach on it. The more restrictive applies.
Mr. Castelli,
Okay.
did you have a follow-up?
No, that makes sense.
If the commission and council do not wish for Dashwood to be extended, then that's a decision that they need to make and include in the staff report conditions.
Thanks, Sonia. Are there additional questions for staff?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hall.
just to clarify, so if Center Point Way goes through, at some point, it would still connect to that other collector up to the north that Dashwood it would also connect to. It would just give 2 points of connection out of that subdivision. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner, yes, that is correct. Wainwright Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Okay. Heath is, or Chris or Adrian, can we get Heath available to speak to us?
Hi, guys. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Heath, for joining us. Please state your name and your address for the record, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street, representing the applicant. And Chris, do you have the ability to get my PowerPoint up?
It's up for you now, and I've just given you control.
Okay. I think I've still got Sonia's up right now. There we go. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so of course we're here to talk about Delano subdivision. As a kind of give you a little bit more context for the location. This is just off of Eagle Road, north of Ustick, near the Dick's and Hobby Lobby shopping areas. So of course it's near major transportation corridors and as well has proximity to shopping. Sorry, a little lag here. I'll also emphasize a couple of the comprehensive plan components, as Sonia mentioned. The area we're going to be discussing tonight is the medium density residential component, while the area to the east is the mixed use regional. Those designations are per the new land use map. They match the prior Boise city planning for the area on the east. It also matches the much more dense project that was previously approved on our south. I do want to clarify a little bit and maybe remind everybody how we got here. It's my understanding that this project was recommended for denial last year by the Planning and Zoning Commission because the Planning and Zoning Commission wanted to see resolution on the area of impact boundaries between Boise City and Meridian. After the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing occurred, that's when I got involved. We went to Boise City, and Boise City agreed to the area of impact modification. That all occurred prior to going to Meridian City Council for their consideration of this application. When this was up before Meridian City Council, there was a great deal of debate. It led to a remand on 2 issues. Again, that was the density, and the other issue that came up was this connection to Dashwood. Since that time, the prior applicant group has vacated. There is a new applicant group that's come in. They have asked me to represent them. And I'm taking on a role in which I'm pretty dangerous because I'm kind of pretending to be a planner here a little bit and managing this in a way that I don't typically. But what I did once kind of took the reins on this project was to first schedule a meeting with the Alpine Point HOA board. We met in December of 2019, and what you can see on your meeting or on your screen is the full-size sheet of the prior application. What I did was I spread it out on the table with the board members, and we just had a conversation about what the board's priorities would be with the remanded plat. You can see the notes here on the document, and what we talked about was a reduction in density overall. We talked about reducing density in particular on the north boundary, but still retaining the limitation to a single story. We also talked about an emergency connection, only at Dashwood, and to make the primary access to the subdivision on Centerpoint. If you'll recall, that was inverted with the prior application. The prior application was going to have a gate at Centerpoint, and the primary access would have been at Dashwood. Other items that were identified were cross-access to the future multifamily R40 area to the east. You can see my hand-scrawled notes there. And then we also talked about reorienting the internal lots within the subdivision. So we went to work, modified the plan, and this is what I wanted you to be able to see them kind of side by side here. As you can see, the density is reduced. The primary connection is now down on Centerpoint. The internal lots are reoriented, and the park is still facing Alpine Point, but it's been increased in size. So this is the plan I took back to the board in late December for a second meeting. Here's some more detail on that. There was a reduction from 85 to 66 lots, or about 22%. Again, the relocation of the primary access, the emergency only access at North Dashwood, and Commissioner Casanelli, I'll talk about that some more, and hopefully we can make sure that everybody understands our perspective on that. The north boundary lots were reduced, and we'll talk about that some more, but we retained the single story limit despite the reduction. The internal lots have been reoriented, so they're east-west rather than north-south. And then again, the park was expanded. So this is the revised plan. After meeting with the board twice, I took this to the Alpine Point HOA general meeting in February 2020. Felt good coming out of those meetings that we're largely on the same page. I think most people had appreciated what we've done. There are some additional comments that have come in since then, and I intend to address those as we go here. A couple items in addition to point out, for example, based on the reduction in density and the neighbor comments, we no longer have attached product in the project. Everything is single family detached, so we updated the elevations as a result. Sonia mentioned the neighborhood amenities. Despite the reduction in the density, the neighborhood amenities have remained. We have 5 more than what's required, including what I think is a pretty cool proposal for an art installation and seating area down in the southwest corner of the project. I'll show you where that is. So that is down here. That I would note that that is not counted in the city's open space calculation, for better or for worse. Even without that being counted, we're still above the minimums. But this piece and this piece were not counted. And that's something Sonia and I will just debate another day, but we meet the minimums anyway. So moving forward, the kind of primary concerns as I perceive them in reading the record have focused on a couple of general themes. One was a desire for larger lots on the northern boundary, and to make the second would be to make the Dashwood emergency, or the Dashwood access emergency, only on a permanent basis. So let's talk about the northern boundary first. We've reduced the number of lots on the northern boundary from 15 to 11. Previously, there were 5 duplexes as well within that 15. So you have a 25% decrease in the number of lots approximately, and we increased the average square footage of those lots from about 3,800 to about 56, or actually 5661 square feet. That's the average. And I want to talk a little bit about that in context. There's a lot of transition to cover in only about 600 feet north to south for this project. We have to transition from Alpine Point's 3 units to the acre all the way to the Brickyard Development's multifamily density at 22 to 3 units a the acre. It's a lot of ground to cover in terms of transitioning the project. And just to give you a little bit more context, these are some photos from the Brickyard project to our south. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but this will tell you, kind of show you the density transition that we have to deal with here. So we're going from a very, very dense project on the south up to Alpine Point. We think that we've transitioned this appropriately. We've given up a number of lots on that northern boundary. We think that this is an appropriate compromise when it comes to that. So next point is the Dashwood stub. And I think we can't talk about this without having a little bit of the context that we're coming from. And I think we kind of witnessed that in Sonia's comments during the staff report. As you know, Meridian and ACHD require connectivity. Meridian's comprehensive plan is filled with it, with references to connectivity. ACHD's policy manual is the same way. There is an existing stub and existing ACHD right-of-way at Dashwood. Now, as we were directed by council and at the urging of Alpine Point, we revisited the question of access, both the primary access at Centerpoint, at Centerpoint, and the emergency access at Dashwood. I asked ACHD if we could have an emergency only access there. I did not propose that it be temporary. At the time of the neighborhood meeting on February 18th, we did not yet have ACHD's decision. I let the group know that my initial conversations with ACHD were encouraging, but we needed to get ACHD's decision. I also explained the difficulty in light of the existing policies. I explained that if folks would like to have Dashwood vacated, there is a process to do that north of our property, but that is outside of our control. I talked about that process. 2 days later, on February 20th, ACHD issued their updated decision. They agreed to the emergency only, but would only do so on a temporary basis. There are a lot of reasons for that, including the policies promoting connectivity, and I just can't emphasize this enough. Getting ACHD to agree to limiting this to emergency only on a temporary basis was a pretty significant thing. And I considered it a significant win on behalf of the neighbors that had asked for that. This raises a few other points and the kind of transitioning from there. Maybe if that slide will come with me. Chris, do I still have control?
Yes, you do. Sorry, I was trying to get control to unmute.
Oh, there we go. I think it's waking up now. There we go. So that leads to a couple of other points. After the ACHD decision came down, I became aware that the Alpine Point neighbors were not happy with it being temporary. I went back and asked again. ACHD said no, they won't agree to that being a permanent emergency only. There's been several alternative layouts that have been floated. As I review those, I kind of see a common theme there, and that would be a connection of Della Street out to Center Point. Della is in the northern area of our property. So I discussed that with ACHD, and they indicated they would not permit Della Street to punch through to the east given the current approved road configuration. And then third, I talked to ACHD about whether we can enter into a license agreement to landscape within Dashwood on our side of the property, try to make it look less of a road in the short term. Again, trying to give some more comfort to the neighbors. The answer there again was no. So I've tried to be very responsive to the neighbors' concerns. I feel like we've gotten them what we can that's within our power. I have no objection whatsoever to a permanent emergency closure. And the Alpine Point neighbors can certainly petition to vacate Dashwood, and maybe with that they could get a different result. But I feel like I've pushed that as far as I can. What we are showing on our plans, and I think to resolve Commissioner Casanelli's confusion there, what we are showing on our plans is emergency bollards and a pedestrian bicycle connection for as long as ACHD will allow it. So I'll try to wrap up there, and then I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. We do believe that this is in accord with the comprehensive plan. We believe that this satisfies each of the requirements of the various agencies. I think I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize that this is infill development in a very appropriate location. We know that that's a City of Meridian priority. And I'll just also emphasize that we feel like we've made significant modifications to satisfy the concerns that were raised by the neighbors and to address the items that we were directed toward on this remand. And then with that, hopefully this is helpful for you all. Sonia mentioned the conditions of approval that we'd asked to modify. Again, we are not asking to modify the single story limitation on the north. That would stay. We are asking to remove it on the west. We've reduced our density significantly. The property to the west, as we understand it, has been purchased for development. We think it makes sense to keep that on the north, but we've asked to remove that from the west. And then with regard to condition 2B, I don't know if you had the opportunity to review my letter. As Sonia mentioned, we have no issue with constructing all of the road section of Center Point within the first phase. We agree that that makes sense. What we're asking for is based on the likelihood of throwaway construction. As has been mentioned a number of times, the multifamily portion of the project requires a conditional use permit. What that means is it hasn't been designed, it hasn't been engineered, it hasn't been entitled, and it is highly likely that landscape and sidewalk that gets installed before that process occurs is going to be throwaway. There's nothing to connect to now. We'd ask that we be able to do that at the time of development of the multifamily piece. And so I think the easiest way to address that would be just simply to delete condition 2B. With that, I will wrap up and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Heath. We appreciate it. Are there questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Holland.
The area that's to the west perimeter of the boundary of your development, you had mentioned that there was someone who was underdeveloped or had purchased it and is going to come forward with development. That area is proposed as residential, I believe, on the future use map. And maybe this is a question for staff, but do we know what type of residential is recommended there on the future use map? Is it R4, R8, or just kind of medium density?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Holland, I believe it's all medium density on the future use, on the land use map.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Castanelli, go right ahead. Oh, is that Bill?
This is Bill from planning. I can elaborate with Lisa because I've actually spoke to the new owner of the property. And so, yeah, their vision is to keep the existing residents at some point in the future, convert that into almost like an event center for outdoor events, for weddings, because of how nice the property is, and then add some more patio homes into the area. So yeah, his vision is to go R8 at some point in the future. At least those are the discussions that I've had, high level discussions I've had with the new owner.
Thanks, Bill.
Additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Pitzer, go right ahead.
thank you. I believe that to the east of this project, where the multifamily is, it's City of Boise, and there was a sign out there for a 3-story senior home out there, and they are requesting connectivity through Jasmine. Are we working with Mr. Heath, working with them on that connectivity?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pitzer, yes. And our plan shows cross access, and we are in communications with them. We have no issues whatsoever with the staff's recommendation on that to ensure that cross access is provided.
And I want to caution us all that we need to focus on this application. I know we want to know what's going on around us, but for the applicant and for everybody around them, we need to focus on this application. So
right, I was questioning that as to the amount of traffic that would then be routed through there, through Dashwood.
the challenge is we don't know what comes. That could get denied. And much like Commissioner Holland said, we can't provide conjecture and guess. We've got to deal with what's there now. That's the challenge with infill. I mean, that's something we're going to deal with in this conversation. So let's be careful on how we approach that, because Heath and his folks he represents can't deal with what's not approved around him. So let's be careful on how we approach that.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I don't mind the question. Just want to make sure we're being fair to the applicant and the folks around them.
Correct. Also, the follow-up question, Mr. Heath, are you aware that, and I'm sure you are if you were at the meeting, but I'm looking over at what the remand was, and that Mr. Conger, when asked, said, we don't want a denial. If you're telling us to look back at the northern boundary, he would do traditional lots similar to what's across the street. Do you feel that the density that you have there is being what the council asked and what Mr. Conger agreed to?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pitzer, I'm not aware of any specific direction that was provided there by the council. In other words, the council didn't say go identify a specific number. Again, we have a new group here. We have again reduced that from 15 to 11 and increased the size by 50%. I would also note that it would be in any event, it would be very difficult to match up those lot lines against Alpine Point. Because if you look at the overhead map, those are pie piece lots to a certain degree, where they on the two roadways east and west of Dashwood, those are cul-de-sacs there, and they open up pretty wide on the backside. So we have to transition, from Brickyard all the way up to Alpine Point, and I do think that this is an appropriate compromise.
Okay, thank you. No, I think you did a great job as far as reducing the density. I was just wondering lot size against that northern boundary. If you thought that they were being modified to what our city council was requesting.
Right, and I'm not aware of any specific direction from the council. I think the council directed a remand to revisit that, and then we spent the time to do that, to hear folks out, and then come up with an alternative proposal, and that's what you have before you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Harmon Carville.
That's Sonia, actually.
Sorry, I apologize.
Thank you. If I may respond to Commissioner Pitzer's earlier comments on the assisted living facility that's being constructed in the city of Boise, adjacent to the site on the east. If I understood her correctly, she was, I believe she was inquiring about access to that property. That is actually directly related to this application, and I did cover it in my intro. Properties that have direct access to an arterial or a state highway such as that, when we get properties in for development like this, our code requires that they provide access to such properties via either a local street or a cross-access easement driveway. So staff is recommending, as a provision of this application, conditions of approval, that either a cross-access easement with a driveway is provided to that property so that they can have access to Center Point, or a local street is provided. Guessing they'll do a cross-access easement, but that is a condition of the staff report. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for clarifying. And Commissioner Pitzer, I apologize if I got crossways in understanding what you were asking. If it's already being built, that definitely is something we need to take into account. So thank you for clarifying for both of us.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Casanelli, go right ahead.
Heath, in your conversations with ACHD about the pedestrian and emergency access to Dashwood, did you get a feeling that, I mean, they're allowing it to be temporary there, and I'm talking about ACHD and not City of Meridian right now, but ACHD was okay with that being temporary for up to 10 years. Did you get the impression that 5 years from now they could be flexible in making that permanent?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Casanelli, I've been in the development process world for long enough that I always have maybe unwarranted optimism that I can get through any obstacle. I didn't ask that specific question, would you be open in 5 years, because it's just hypothetical. But I think that is certainly, if folks want to see that continue, they should go, knock on ACHD's door and see if they would allow it to continue. I think the 10 years, if I were to guess, is based on the time limit for their road trust. Because as has been mentioned in the staff report and in ACHD's documents, we have to actually put up money to allow ACHD to complete the connection later on, and that goes into this road trust, and that road trust has a 10-year term on it. I would guess that might be where that's coming from. But certainly folks should feel free to go have that conversation again later on.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seal.
Just as a follow on to that, it's actually, I mean, it's 10 years, or when Center Point Way is extended onto Wainwright. That's what ACHD agreed to according to what I'm reading. And then a question for the applicant. It's the same question I asked staff, which is the north lateral that runs along the northern boundary. As far as what is the easement on that, and how is that going to be addressed?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Seal, I apologize, I meant to address that. So we have been in touch with the North Lateral folks. We've reviewed the Alpine Point plat. The Alpine Point plat includes a 15-foot easement for the North Lateral. It's our understanding that that was built and piped with the construction of Alpine Point. Just to be safe, we're proposing to put an additional easement ground on our side of the fence, just in case any additional is needed. But we believe that that's been fully constructed, and the plat for Alpine Point shows an easement on for the lateral.
So will that be? I mean, right now it's not depicted on the plat at all as far as the land you're going to provide for that. Will that be depicted on the final plat that you submit?
Correct.
And question for staff is that something that we would need to add into a motion that we put in order to make sure it's in there, or is that good enough?
I cannot remember, Chairman, Commissioners, if that is in the staff report or not. I'm looking.
So, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was just gonna maybe expand upon that. It's as Sonia looks at that condition of approval. So certainly, as Sonia mentioned to you in her staff report this evening, if it's greater than 10 feet, we're gonna want that in a common lot. But the applicant does have the ability to ask for that to remain on as part of the buildable lot as he goes through the public hearing process. So let's go ahead and see what Sonia finds with her condition of approval. If we think he's gonna dedicate 15 feet, then as he moves forward to city council, you may want to include a condition that council takes action on that, or either stay with staff's recommendation and ask for a revised plat to see it in a common lot, or if you feel comfortable moving it forward with them, going before city council with a recommendation of it being a easement on the back of the buildable lots. That makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chair, if I could, oh, sorry, Bill.
Yep, if you look at the plat, that's the surrounding plat with them, we didn't get that with Zebulon Heights, so I'm not sure what we're going to gain with having a common lot along the back of those rear lots, as it does. There's really no benefit at this point. We should have gotten it with the previous plat, but that code was not in effect at the time that Alpine Point or Zebulon Heights came through the process. So just give you a little bit of context on that as Sonia looks at that condition. What did you find, Sonia?
Chairman, Commissioners, condition of approval number 2A states that on revisions to the plat to depict an easement for the north lateral along the north boundary of the site, and then it just goes into the code requirement. If the easement's 10 feet or greater, it has to be located in a common lot that's a minimum of 20 feet wide and outside of a fenced area unless otherwise modified by council.
Okay.
And Heath, did you have a comment there?
I did. Sorry to interrupt, Bill. Mr. Chair, just to add to that, I believe that Mr. Rand Spivak of the Parkins North Lateral sent in a letter. I think it was it's dated the 11th, and he also confirmed that those structures are all on the north side of our boundary. They're all on the Alpine Point side. But again, you know, if there's additional ground or easement ground that's required, we don't have any issue with Sonia's condition as it's currently stated.
Additional questions for Heath? At least at this point.
Mr. Chair,
So go ahead.
hate to keep beating on this one, but with that north lateral, if that ended up eating into the lots, is that going to do it in such a way that it's going to change, you know, something about the structure of the lot that makes it less than what it is in terms of regulation? Meaning, does it make the lots too small to put on the size of houses that you're wanting to put on there, I guess?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Seal, if I understand your question correctly, and just to just state this one, try to be as clear as I can. there's a 15-foot easement on the Alpine Point plat. The pipeline was built within that 15-foot easement. We're willing to grant additional easement ground on our side, but that won't affect, that doesn't create, as long as we stay within the boundaries that Sonia described earlier, which is that 10-foot limit, it doesn't need to be in a common lot, so it doesn't affect the lot size.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Heath, does that have to go into a plat note that portion of the back fence is unbuildable? Is that what, just for informational?
Yeah, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, it would be like any utility easement.
Yep, okay.
It would show as, you know, that area on the plat as yeah, that it's reserved for those utility uses.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. And Commissioner Pitzer, again, I apologize for the confusion earlier. You had a very valid question and I got confused in that one, so I appreciate that. With that, Madam Clerk, do we have a list of folks who would that have signed up that would like to testify? And Heath, I'll come back to you after so you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have 5 people signed in, one of which represents a homeowners association, and that would be Melissa Bernard.
Okay. Do you want to unmute Melissa and let her kick it off for an extended period of time? Melissa, I think you're unmuted. Do you want to kick us off, introduce yourself, and give us your address for the record, please, ma'am?
Yes, sir. My name is Melissa Bernard. I live at 4025 North Dashwood. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, and that's in Meridian, A3646. I just wanted to touch on a few points that I've heard. We did ask for Heath for a permanent vacation. You can see that on the notes of the original meeting that we had back in December of 2019. We asked for a closure of Dashwood to vehicles in perpetuity. This is very important because this is based on the de facto collector or cut through traffic possibilities. Also, this plan changes based on the way the realignments of the lots happen. You're going to have a fork in the road, so to speak, from Centerpoint Way up through Delano to Dashwood. And you're going to a very high density, lots of infill, lots of traffic. They're going to find any way to get to where they need to go quicker. We think that this should be something that's done in the preliminary plat phase. We believe that should be recommended to council to vacate the stub at Dashwood and start the process right now with the city, not something after TAS ACHD. As we know, we're kind of over-connected at this point. I would also say the closure could be achieved through a gate. There's one at Settlers Bridge. That's emergency only. And how that occurs is they have a simple padlock there for the fire department. Or we must have connectivity. We could have emergency only, bike, pedestrian, and it needs to be in perpetuity for this to work. I also saw in Heath's notes at the initial meeting, we had a minimum of 6,000 square feet as a starting lot. He said the average of the lots to the north are 61 square feet. This is just something that most neighbors adjacent to the border would like that to be rejigged. And also an additional ingress egress is possible at the extension of Della. I've seen some traffic there between ACHD and the commission. With the rejig of Centerpoint Way, this could be achieved. And also point 4 would be 2-story or more transitional product on the Cook parcel. We are oversaturated with 3 stories, high density, really packing it in on all this infill. Infill is important. But we also have to be careful with that.
Melissa, we have your slides up if you need to reference anything.
Okay.
So just FYI, if you want us to go through anything, that's there for us to look at if you need it.
All right, certainly. So I can drive, or should I direct?
Let me know, like we discussed, tell me what slide and when you need to be there.
Okay, when we get to that, I just have a couple more points and then we'll roll through if I have enough time. Also, we think the company should be on record with the city for transparency. That's pretty important. Right now, we have an LLC. We don't know who the builder is, what the type of product for the housing. We don't know if this is going to be rental, single family. We have no idea who the builder is, who the company is represented. It's behind an LLC at this time. And also we have said time and time again for the closure of Dashwood to avoid the cut through and have this be permanent. The applicant said they weren't against the closure, yet without concrete and filed correspondence with the city agencies, you know, we kind of have doubts about the fate of Dashwood. So we are asking the commission to recommend to council, since they're the deciding body, to address the Dashwood situation and to have that be permanently closed. And has anyone, I know Bill has talked to the Endlers. He called me this evening. So he might have an opinion about the single family homes to the west and their size. And also I think he's concerned about access. How are they going to get home when all this construction's going on? And also the UDC was referenced that all local streets and stub streets must connect, and that's the way you want to do it. There's many stubs through the city of Meridian that have been decommissioned and closed through traffic. So there's 4 examples. You should have seen them in the correspondence before, where these stubs are decommissioned. And also the city can initiate the vacation of such because it falls under land use. And if you don't think it's a good fit for Meridian. So it is in the power of City of Meridian to initiate these processes. Okay. If you go slide 2, please. This is what we got in January 2019, and here's what we got in 2020. As you can see, there's little deviation. I asked for less lots to the north, and this is just basically, let's just get this, stamp it, print it, call it done. I don't think there was a whole bunch of effort done on this. We did try the Dashwood thing. As you can see, we didn't even get that. But I do admit that there's a reduction. Usable green space, that's much better. We still have a lot of lots, and the transition to our R4 neighborhood. Yeah, I think they could do a little better on the lots up north. And then on number 3, please. As you can see, we are grossly overconnected for neighborhood our size. As you can see from the city mile, we've got 9 connections, 6 are built now. And then we have 3 very close north-south connections of the future. For some reason, it seems like our whole neighborhood has been retrofitted to address a vehicle and traffic problem that we shouldn't be the only ones to bear. As you can see, most of the east, west, and north, south is going to be routed through our neighborhood. Eagle Road 10 years ago isn't anything like it is today. And it seems like since we were the last neighborhood on the block, we were the ones that were going to get retrofitted to handle all the traffic that's coming. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see, ACHD has been talked to. Della is possible with some rejigs. I'm not an engineer. This is just a resident who sees a problem, how this could be addressed. Jasmine to the south is very important for the Enslers to get home. Also, I know Sonia referenced a lane, cross access, or some sort of street for the stellar development that'll be coming. We have to be very careful with infill. We have to make sure it fits, that we don't overwhelm neighborhoods, that the flow is great. Personally, I hate cross access. I hate driving through parking lots and in front of people's homes or apartments to get somewhere else. I don't like cutting through the Taco Bell parking lot, etc. So I think if the cities and the agencies could get together and try to make this work, you're going to have a bigger population down here, and we should probably do our best to make sure it's smooth. People aren't going to have to cut through and such. And number 5, please. As you can see, the Bollinger parcel is full of RVs. Dashwood was never signed as a stub. We had all thought, thinking that this was a cul-de-sac. As you can see, we thought that perhaps this was in the future for gate access for the Bollinger parcel and for north lateral access in case they needed to address anything on the Bollinger parcel. And again, we had no idea that this was coming. We've been kind of blindsided a little bit without the stub being connected. Number 6, please. As you can see, Centerpoint was quite the surprise as well. This is deeded as a common lot on the final plat filed with Boise. You have to dig into Ada County to find the quitclaim deed, the warranty deed of Lot 7, which is for the Centerpoint Way collector to be found. So everyone bought here thinking that this was a landscape strip. No one on Brooksburg had any idea that there was going to be a collector. In fact, we didn't know this until the applicant came forward. Number 7, please. As you can see, this is MSM master street maps. It doesn't show the collector going up to Wainwright until the amendment in 2018. Now, if this was done in 2005, you would think that this would have been reflected upon the map much earlier. And also you can see on Blueprint Boise, Centerpoint Way connects and lines up Bald Cypress. It doesn't go all the way up to Wainwright. So we're getting kind of hit with a double whammy, and you know, no one knew this. No one bought foolishly. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Next slide, please. So the things we're seeking are the emergency only at Dashwood in perpetuity. There is another ingress egress that is possible for traffic flow, as you can see from the ACHD correspondence with the commissioners. This would avoid a twin de facto collector, create a better flow through Delano, and there would be no cut through for Delano if Dashwood was closed. We are seeking larger lots, single story to the north for better transition. Also 2-story transitional product on the Cook parcel. R15 fits the MUR comp plan designation. And also all construction traffic to Jasmine only, with no exceptions except for the initial utility connections. We also believe funds should be provided by all development for the improvement of Eagle Road and Wainwright intersection. In the ITD report, they were seeking the southbound approach to the light on Eagle to be reconfigured and lengthened at this point. And also there should be transparency and a named parent company for the project. And furthermore, a good development and traffic plan. There are many ways to develop this infill. New infill development should not disrupt the homes and lives of 211 lives of families on 211 homes on 90 acres. And lastly, there's just a few questions about the housing type. Is this rental? the builder, and the ITD requirement. And we're hoping that there will be good connectivity to the south of us. That'll be great for all the infill parcels. And again, about the cross access on parking lots, if we could even have an unofficial lane of some sort. It doesn't need to be a dedicated street. That might be best for this whole city block. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, who is next on our list?
Mr. Chair, next is Laura T.
And if you'll unmute Laura, you are unmuted. You have the floor. Please give us your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Yes, this is Laura Triratinopat, 4621 North Camas Creek Way in Meridian, and I am a resident of the Alpine Point subdivision. First of all, thank you very much for taking all the time and trouble to set us up so that we can do this remotely. As a person who's in her 60s, I really appreciate not having to go out into a public meeting. So thank you for doing that. I know it was not easy. I'd just like to bring up 2 quick points. The issue of connectivity. We hear that word bandied about a lot and used in very serious conversations. Connectivity is definitely important, but it's also a relative term. There is no specific definition of how much connectivity is not enough or how much is too little. And I think it is possible for it to be too much connectivity. I would just like to suggest that perhaps planning and zoning and the city of Meridian, or whoever Ada County is actually involved in this, sit down, talk, and perhaps come up with some standards for what connectivity means. How much is enough, but how much is too much? And I truly believe that Alpine Point is already thoroughly connected without adding in the Dashwood connection and of course Center Point. Second point that I want to bring up, if I understood correctly, we were told tonight that the city of Meridian requires that streets be extended, but the ACHD's approach is that we could have Dashwood used as temporary emergency road only for 10 years until Center Point opens up. And the point was made that if there's a conflict between ACHD versus City of Meridian, then it would be the more restrictive approach applies. And as I'm reading it, the more restrictive approach is that of ACHD, which says they can go ahead and use bollards, as Heath has suggested, and as we talked about in our meetings with Heath, that we could use bollards to keep Dashwood closed only for emergencies, at least for 10 years or until Center Point opens up all the way. Obviously, ideally, Center Point would be closed forever from my point of view and the point of view of my neighbors, the 200 of us living in our subdivision. If we were to go ahead and get permission to close it temporarily, then it would be possible for Heath and his project to start work. We, meanwhile, from Alpine Point, would have time to petition ACHD to vacate Dashwood in perpetuity so that it could be permanently closed off. So that's just an idea I had that I would like to put out there. And I think that's all right now. Thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate you being here or being a part of this evening. And Madam Clerk, I'll let you take the next one or provide us the next name.
Michael Bernard.
And Mr. Bernard, I think you are unmuted now, sir. So you have 3 minutes. Please give us your name and your address for the record, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commission, can you all hear me?
You're a little bit muffled, a little bit quiet. If you can speak up a little bit more.
Okay, how is this better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Michael Bernard. I live at 4025 North Dashwood Place, Meridian, Idaho, 83646. So obviously a homeowner on Dashwood, which is one of the more contentious elements, at least from my personal perspective and that of many of my neighbors. So I just want to amplify maybe some of the points that have been made earlier and make a couple of my own. First, I want to amplify the fact that this commission has recommended to council, and council has in the past closed other stubs. In fact, Mr. Clark, representing a different development at a time, made the point before this commission and the council asking for that to be done on behalf of a different development, because they would become a pinwheel. So basically, we're really saying the same thing. We're taking the same perspective as Mr. Clark has in the past for very, very similar circumstances. In fact, I mean, the city, I think, has the ability to do that, and regardless of what the county wants. But I'll move on. If anyone could recall, or if it would be possible to pull up the drawings of the original proposal that was presented, a year ago compared to what we have now, and sort of compare them, I think you'll realize that the reason why some of this reconfiguration was done from the old layout to the new layout, part of that was based on the fact that we wanted Dashwood to be closed, and the current applicant was proposing to close Dashwood and have it be an emergency only. Now, if you notice in the prior one, they had sort of meandered the traffic around back and forth. That way, anyone coming in through Dashwood or coming up through Centerpoint on the south, you wouldn't have any racetrack sort of a layout, right? Now, you look at the new one on the right. The new one on the right, if Dashwood is open completely to Centerpoint, you notice that's a racetrack, right? There is no sort of traffic mitigating features in play there. You can go as fast as you want up and down any of those streets, either east, west, or north, south, through Dashwood and the north-south connectors. So really what I'm talking about here is not only from a concern of the current homeowners in my subdivision, or specifically on my street, but we need to think about the people that are going to be buying and living here as well, right? If Dashwood is open permanently and we build here, who really wants to live on that street? I mean, most people are like me. I bought on a place that I thought was a cul-de-sac. It was never signed like the other streets in my neighborhood when I bought that said this street to be connected in the future. My street wasn't signed. I thought I was living on a turnaround that was just there for construction vehicles and garbage trucks. Now, I bought there because I like living on a cul-de-sac. Everyone says, oh, I like where I live. There's no traffic. You ever hear anyone say they like living on a street that has a lot of traffic? Well, now if we go to if we go down a couple of slides where you see how that connects to the property to the south, that abomination they call the brickyards. Well, imagine if you live on one of these streets in this new proposed subdivision, and all the traffic that's going to come through your neighborhood from all that property to the south and then through my street. How can we possibly allow that? It's poor planning. It's not considering the families and the kids who are going to be living in this proposal, and it's certainly not considering my grandkids that come visit me at my house, or the other disabled folks that live across the street from me that are out checking their mail in their wheelchairs. We're creating a racetrack. I need to get off my soapbox on that.
Yeah, if you could wrap your comments up, Mr. Bernard, we appreciate it.
Okay. And that's all I have. I appreciate my time's probably run out. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here or being a part of tonight. Madam Clerk, who is next, ma'am?
Mr. Chair, we have Sandy King.
Thank you. And Sandy, you are unmuted. If you would like to state your name and your address for the record, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and the Planning and Zoning Commissioners. Appreciate the work to be able to have us all part of this meeting tonight. It's been a stressful time for pretty much everybody, I think. My issues are, I was part of the meetings with Mr. Clark in December and January, as I used to be on the HOA board. We talked about a lot of things. He's correct in most of what he has said. I'm not really challenging that. But I do want to say we never deviated from saying Dashwood needed to be vacated or closed and only open to foot or bike traffic. We talk about Idaho cities and counties in our state as a whole as being livable and a beautiful place to live and raise families. If you allow this to open up into our subdivision, it will not be livable. I would ask you to drive through the area, and the apartments that Mr. Bernard just referred to, there might be called the brickyards, but everyone refers to them as the barracks because they are so huge and so ugly and so many that all will funnel through our subdivision. There's no way around it. People leaving Dick's Sporting Goods, Hobby Lobby, all of that shopping center and food eatery won't want to go to Eagle because Eagle is so crazy busy. So they will be funneling through our subdivision. There's no other option. Also, if you could pull up Melissa's slide number 3, we not only have 9 points of ingress and egress as it stands now. If you permanently vacate Dashwood, we will still have 8 points. I think that is still over connectivity. So we're not asking for the moon. We're just asking you to make this a little more livable. My other point is Rogue River comes down and is one of those points of egress. And I believe it is where number 7 is. It's the blue line going up. Rogue River is a T street, goes down very close to the brickyards. It is part of the, I don't know what the city refers to it as, but it is the walk bike path that is approximately 10 feet wide. It comes up from the south, meanders through Alpine Point and continues on. That's connectivity. That is massive walk bike path connectivity. It goes through our park area, goes through our subdivision in front of our homes. I think you're asking more than one subdivision should have to give. I'm asking you all to please consider what you're doing to the homeowners that purchased thinking we had a nice subdivision, streets wide enough to back RVs, because most of us have RV garages, to be able to pull up, back them into your garage, and maintain a comfortable subdivision, comfortable living, safe place for our children and our grandchildren to play. You have the ability to recommend vacating Dashwood. I would strongly ask that you do that. And I think that is the bulk of what I would like to say tonight. And I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate your time. One last point. I would also like to state that our homes we purchased not being aware of this because it wasn't public information. The other point is Delano subdivision is being built for profit. It is not an individual homeowner that we're requesting a limitation of. He can sell his property, but the development is for profit. And I think that is a consideration that should be also considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. King. We appreciate it. Madam Clerk, who is next?
Mr. Chair, lastly, we have Kenneth Clifford.
Thank you. And Mr. Clifford, we're working on getting you unmuted, sir. Hold on one second.
Mr. Chair, it looks like he has to unmute himself.
Mr. Clifford, can you unmute yourself and then we can hear you, sir? If you're on the phone, you can hit *6. If you can unmute yourself on the bottom left of your screen. I think you could, the host can unmute them, but I cannot.
We cannot either. It's not allowing us when we hit the unmute button. It stays.
Oh, Mr. Clifford, I think you are unmuted, sir. If you want to state your name and your address for the record, I think you've got 3 minutes.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that was quite the deal. My name is Kenneth Clifford. I'm at 4523 North Rose Point Place in Meridian. I'm also in the Alpine Point subdivision. I submitted my testimony in writing earlier today, and it should be in your packet. Everything else that I would want to talk about, they have people before me have already done so eloquently that I would be in repetition. What I would like to point out, though, that hasn't been talked about is the overcapacity of the schools. In going back through the packet, I see that the West Ada School District submitted their reply on April 16th, 2019. And in that letter, they recommended that the city deny the application for Delano subdivision. And they did so because their schools that are impacted by the Delano subdivision are already over capacity. I should say 2 of the 3 schools that are impacted are over. And I have the information in my submission, but the Discovery Elementary is the only one that is not over capacity. The Heritage Middle School was 254 students over, or 125%. And the Rocky Mountain High School has an enrollment of 2,448 with a capacity of 1,800. So it's 136% of capacity, or 648. That information is a year old. That letter was dated on April 16th, 2019. And here we are, actually exactly 1 year later. And I don't know what, if anybody has taken into consideration the additional growth that we've had in Meridian that impacts those schools, or if that's just a moot point. Other than that, I think that my other cohorts have covered the material very eloquently. And I agree with Sandy and all of those that we are overconnected. And we're going to maintain the connectivity when we open up the Rogue River Way, and also when Centerpoint comes in. That'll put 2 connections north-south. Dashwood will just simply be overkill. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Clifford, thank you. Is there any additional people on the phone or that would like to testify that we haven't heard from yet? Madam Clerk, are you aware of anybody else? I don't see any hands either.
Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands raised either. If
I do see one. Can we unmute Allie Crane? Allie, you are unmuted. Please state your name and your address for the record, and we're happy to hear from you.
Thank you, sir. My name's Allie Crane. My address is 2654 East Mahoney Street. I'm actually in Champion Park subdivision. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I with everything going on, I had planned this meeting, and then I did not think about it until right when it started. So I filled out the form, but it was late. So I'm on the south end of the proposed subdivision of Delano, and I actually am at the north end of Champion Park. We're on Mahoney, where kind of Petty and Leslie Way meet on a very short stub street, Mahoney Street. So it's very short. If you could compare the original and the new plan comparison, that slide is what I really wanted to address. Obviously, most of the concerns have been about the Dashwood Drive, and ours is more of a tree issue. And I know I spoke at the last city council meeting when this proposal was available. If you can see in the original plan, there were trees all along that southern boundary of the Delano subdivision. And those are all mature, about 30 feet trees. I couldn't even tell you how many there are. There's probably about 30, 40 trees that line at the angle and then also on the center point. And so our home, along with about 4 of my neighbors, we sit kind of on that slant and where it turns to the straight. And so those trees were pretty important to us for this subdivision because, one, they're mature trees, and I'm not sure how the city feels about taking out very mature trees that are healthy. I understand when they get diseased, it's obviously important to take them out, but healthy trees are nice to have. And you can see that that original plan had a lot of green space, mostly trees on the bottom, which was probably nice for them also because as you moved farther east and you get into the brickyard to try to avoid the views of the brickyard. And then if you look at the new plan, and this is where my major concern is with this, is that there is no trees. They've taken out pretty much all of those 40-ish trees to the south of their development. So it's a concern. I'd like to see a way to incorporate those trees back into the plan. I was trying to look through the materials to see what those lot spaces are, or lot sizes on that bottom, what they look like, and if those are single level homes or double or 2-story homes, but I was having a hard time going through the materials quickly. So I think that's my primary concern that I just wanted to relay, that we're taking out a huge number of very nice mature pine trees, evergreens. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. We appreciate your input. That was perspective we hadn't heard, so I appreciate that. Any additional hands raised? Any additional participants that we haven't heard from? Not seeing any. Give everybody a second here.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
When the public testimony is concluded, I do have a item I'd like to discuss with the commission.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any additional hands being raised on Zoom. Madam Clerk, one more ask of you. Is there anybody else that you are aware of that needs to or was wanting to testify?
Mr. Chair, I am not aware of anybody else.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Sonia, you want to go right ahead and then we'll provide it to Heath to close?
Yes, thank you. In response to Ms. Allie Crane's testimony on the existing trees that are along the southern boundary of the site, staff did discuss this issue with the applicant with the previous development plan. And the applicant relayed to staff that those trees were planned to be removed by the existing residential property owner for firewood. Staff did include a condition of approval in the staff report to include mitigation information on the plan for any existing trees that are not removed from the property. You know, if I would recommend if these trees are still existing today, if commission and council has a desire for those to remain, they're not going to be able to remain with the current lot configuration, but be mitigated for as they exist today. I would suggest recommending that in the conditions of approval specifically. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Any additional questions for the staff before we turn it over to the applicant for closure? Okay, hearing none. Heath, would you like to take us or to close, please, sir?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street in Boise. A couple items that I'll just kind of hit in rapid fire fashion, and then if there are additional questions, I'm happy to try to address them. With regard to the lots on the north, let's see, can I have the PowerPoint back? Thank you. So with regard to the lots on the north, as Ms. Bernard stated, and you can see it right here, it's not very easy to see, but we had written in 6,000 square feet. That was what we were shooting for. Our average is 5,661 feet. We've got a couple of those of the lots in the new plan that are actually over 6,000. We feel like we've done what we can to compromise there. And again, we're transitioning, we're going a long ways with that transition. With regard to the question of two-story limitation on the R40 section, I would just say that that's not appropriate at this time. There's a conditional use permit application that will be required before multifamily can go on that parcel. At that time, any of those types of limitations would be fair game to discuss, but it's premature to discuss that at this point. With regard to schools, the West Ada letter, the specific language there was that it is West Ada School District's opinion it would be best to delay the approval of the Delano subdivision until fall 2020, within a year of the opening of Hawaii High School. Congratulations, everybody, we made it. As long as this has gone on, that's not an issue. With regard to Dashwood, you know, a couple points, and I feel like I'm in a bit of a pinch here. You know, from one perspective, you know, these roads are all well within capacity at build out. But I want to be clear that I haven't been advocating for an open Dashwood. You know, we asked for emergency only. We were able to get temporary emergency only. This is not the same as Three Corners, where the property in question was a complete pinwheel, but ultimately I'm asking for the same thing. You know, I'm asking to limit connectivity by doing at least a temporary emergency only. And Laura, you know, her comments are spot on. You know, it's exactly what I've tried to suggest, which is, including at the neighborhood meeting in February, which is, you know, that's, you know, if folks really want, you know, closure on this, the best way to get there is to make an application to vacate. And the Idaho code for that is 40-203. There is a process, and it involves, in most instances, the homeowners who live on each side of the property to be vacated. Until that right of way at Dashwood on the north side is vacated, I do think it's going to be a tough road to hoe to get that to be anything but temporary emergency access. But again, that's what we've asked for. We've asked for it to be an emergency access, and you know, hope we'll be, you know, at some point given some credit for that by the neighbors. I think with that, I think those are the issues that I wanted to follow up on. Happy to answer any follow-up questions that the commissioners might have.
Thanks, Heath. Commissioners, do you have questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pitzer.
Thank you. Mr. Heath, in looking over the many letters and the other testimonies, alternative plats or designs have been submitted. Have you taken a look at those and make any considerations for alternate designs, especially some that would offer some traffic calming, other than this direct route that is shown here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pitzer, I became aware of those alternatives probably 6 weeks ago. Had a number of conversations with Melissa and the board via email about those. I provided comments, you know, my impressions of them. This was, you know, after we'd had our 2 meetings and after the neighborhood meeting, but I did try to take all of that into account. It appears to me that most of those are dependent on Della punching, so the north, the east-west road on the north those plans are largely dependent on that punching through all the way to center point. That is something based on the currently approved road configuration that ACHD's approved here. The DELA cannot punch through. And that's because of the layout and the safety issues with regard to the way that the intersections would arrive. Now, if you were to modify that and push center point over, I think you raise a whole list of other questions. Now, again, this is the road configuration that ACHD has approved. I think if you move off of that, what you end up doing is you push the center point off to the east. You end up bisecting your mixed use regional properties, which are pretty narrow in the first place. If you do that, what you're going to end up with is you're going to have Jasmine having the same issues that DELA would otherwise have. And you're creating an issue for our neighbors to the west. So as I look at it, I see this as, yeah, again, this is the road configuration that ACHD has approved. But I think if you go these other routes, that you actually start creating more problems than you solve.
Heath, quick question. At the end of Dashwood right now,
yep,
they currently have a sign that says Stubb Street will be extended in the future.
I'm not Mr. Chair, I'm not aware that they do, but I would show one thing. Can I have the backup slide list?
And maybe Sonia, can you look, is there any signage out there currently on extension?
Extension of Dashwood, Chairman?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I am not sure.
So, Mr. Chair, this is what you see out there. You have two cul-de-sacs on either side of Dashwood, and then you have Dashwood that continues down and then has an extension on the cul-de-sac into the property boundary. I'm not aware of how it's been signed in the past. Again, I am not the person here asking for Dashwood to be fully opened right now. So just keep that in mind. But it does look different than the other cul-de-sacs on either side. Again, we want it to be a temporary emergency. We want people to be able to ride their bikes and walk from Alpine Point down to the shopping areas. We think that's appropriate, and that's what we've asked for. But it does look significantly different than the two cul-de-sacs immediately on either side of it.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pitzer.
I can speak to that sign. I walk that area, and since I've been here since 2015, there's never been a sign on that corner.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Steele.
Yeah, just a quick, I mean, even with the emergency, making that an emergency connection with only the one ingress egress, doesn't that limit them to what they can do as far as how many lots they can have available? I think it limits them to 30 lots or something like that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Seal, with the emergency, that satisfies the 30 lot limitation. It's only if you have a single ingress egress that you're limited to 30.
Okay. So essentially it's just it's a fire department and emergency access requirement, not.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner McCardle.
I'm looking at this right to the Rogue River from the west is going to eventually connect up there with Jasmine.
Commissioner McCarthy, are you asking me if they will connect?
Yeah, either you or Sonia.
That's my understanding. Sonia might have more insight.
Chairman, Commissioner McCarville, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Am I right? The Rogue River to the west is going to connect with Jasmine as well with future development, or is that not in the plan?
with the future development of the property directly to the east.
West.
Yes, that would be required to be extended when that property redevelops, just like Dashwood. Unless otherwise approved by council. There is a clause in city code that if access via a local street is available, and that's what applies in this case, that access should be taken from the local street, and that's like rather than a arterial or collector street. And in the case of Rogue River, that would be the only access. If this property develops, there would also be a local street access stub from this property that would be extended.
Right. Okay.
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner McCarville?
No, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding Rogue, because I thought I heard somebody mention before, Rogue River will come in from the west to Jasmine, as well as Center Point is going to be connected on the east side of Jasmine.
Additional questions for the applicant or staff?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Castanelli.
Sonia, are you aware of where Center Point is designed to punch out to Wainwright in the future? Was that always, right now it's just, I guess, a common lot for better description there between the commercial and the residential. What was that strip of land? Was that an easement for a connector through there, or a collector through, excuse me, or was that a common lot, part of one of the other developments?
Chairman, Commissioner Castanelli, commissioners, I believe it's an open right of way. I do not know when it originated though.
Commissioner Castanelli, I just add to that. It's my understanding that that is ACHD right of way, and that there is a road trust in place to pay for the construction of that the original developer put up. That's my understanding.
So there was a purpose there for that to be a road coming down through there at some point in the future.
Chairman, Commissioner Castanelli, yes, that is where the master street map depicts a collector street connection to Wainwright.
Okay.
And so would they have to vacate the commercial entrance to that office complex or whatever the 4-pod thing is to the west? Would that be 2 curb cuts like right next to each other?
Chairman Fitzgerald, I would assume so. I don't know ACHD's plans long term.
Mr. Chair, again, I walk this area. That is what our neighborhood considers the grassy knoll. It's completely grassed in. At the very end of the street at Wainwright, there are utility boxes, and it's just grass all the way down. There's no signage on it to indicate that there would be a street or anything there. I mean, it's always been just a grassy area between the subdivision. It looked like a buffer zone between the subdivision and the commercial.
Thank you for that. Heath, do you have any additional comments before we close, sir?
No, Mr. Chair, thanks everyone. And this went, I felt like the process is pretty smooth. So appreciate everybody's practice on this. It's good.
We appreciate you being here. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for staff or for the applicant before we close the public hearing?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seal.
And this is more of a legal question, but as far as the marking of Dashwood Place, I mean, it's been reported over and over that that was not marked for extension. Is there some legality behind that as far as the posting of that? What needs to be there? What needs to be posted? How long it needs to be posted?
Sonia or Bill, can you handle that, or maybe Andrea or Ted?
Chairman, I'm not aware of any requirement that ACHD post stub streets for future extension, but they do try to do that just for issues like this so that residents are aware that it is not a dead end street.
Mr. Chair, Ted Baird signed off after the first agenda item, and I'm in agreement with Sonia. I'm not aware of any requirement.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's more than likely it's an ACHD requirement. That was probably typically when we see that, it's an ACHD staff report for that subdivision. And yes, there's typically a condition that says that needs to be signed. No stuff. This will be extended in the future. Why that didn't occur, we don't know. We'll have to go back through the public record and look at that.
But that's not a legal requirement, I guess, is more my question.
Not a city's. It's an ACHD requirement. They're the ones that require that to be signed. That's why when you look on Google Earth, you'll see the barricades up there. But when I look at Google Earth and drop the guy down on the street there's somebody with a RV and a truck blocking the barricade. So I can't tell what's actually there to verify whether or not it's up there. The signs are usually pretty small, like a no parking sign on a cul-de-sac. So they're not a great big sign that stands out to people, though. I can be honest, to be honest with you, they're pretty small.
So you got exactly where I was going, Bill. That was exactly what I saw. So I was wanting to ask the question. So appreciate it.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
I can look at the conditions of approval really quick and see what was approved back with the preliminary plat.
Mr. Chair, this is Chris. You've had some folks who provided testimony already raising their hands at this point and throughout the last few moments. I believe you've closed that, but I wanted to let you know there are questions, I believe, coming from them.
Thanks, Chris. That they're asking to testify or they're asking to ask questions?
I can only see a raised hand. So if you would like to allow them to let you know what they want, you can do that, but you can you of course would have to have Mr. Clark return at that point as well.
Commissioners, we've allowed public testimony. Do we have folks who want a second chance? We usually do not do that when we go to close, but is there questions out there for the HOA? Anybody have a problem with me allowing Ms. Bernard to talk for a second and allow Heath to close?
I think that's appropriate with everything that's been presented.
I concur.
Chris, will you unmute Ms. Bernard? And Melissa, can you hear us?
I'm showing, oh, hello, I'm showing up right now. I just wanted to say that Dashwood Place has never been signed. It's all in the public testimony. This has been submitted through pictures of how this has always looked. It's never been signed. We've got people who've lived here since 2010 who have said it's never been signed. And also by definition, place also means a closed cul-de-sac or a dead end. Now, when people are buying properties, if it says court or place, that infers that it's a dead end. So by the misnomer of Dashwood Place and its creation in 2005 for a landlocked parcel that does not exist now, that kind of nullifies the need for this stuff. So that's what we're pushing for. It is within planning and zoning to recommend it to be closed. And it's also within the city council's power to do so. So number one, we didn't have a sign. Number two, you've got it it's named as a place, which by definition means a very limited street to traffic. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So any comments there? I think that the challenge I have, and I'll turn to my planning team because they know this better, but when you have a Snoopy or a big wide open cul-de-sac like this that's flat on one end, it usually is going to be extended. That's just, and I'll let Heath close with comments around that. Naming principles are not always And we submit that to the mail, to the post office for approval, not to planning and zoning always. So there are challenges always. They're not always, the places in courts don't always match up perfectly. So I'll let Keith respond there and then let the planning and zoning staff respond as well.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I would add anything more to that. Again, I'm in a bit of a pinch point here with the position that I'm actually advocating. But that is, in order for that to be public right away, it would have been dedicated on the plat, is the only thing I would add to what Mr. Chair said. And I'd leave it at that.
Sonia or Bill, do you have anything else to add on that piece?
Yes, Chairman, Commissioners. When a right-of-way is stubbed to a property line, such as this, the road is meant to be extended, as opposed to just a cul-de-sac that does not have right-of-way extended to the property line. This did have a cul-de-sac for emergency vehicle turnaround, is the reason the cul-de-sac is there, but it also has right-of-way stubbed to the property line, which indicates that it was intended to be extended in the future. Again, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, if I got sidetracked on another thought, but code does require the street to be extended, but it also has a provision for a council waiver of that provision. So anyway, just be aware of that if it is your desire to make any recommendations to council on the extension of Dashwood. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Any additional comments before we close the public hearing?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Castanelli.
Sonia, can you just elaborate on that last point you made? Does council have the authority to make that a permanent closure, or that would have to definitely go through ACHD?
The city council does have authority to act on it through our city code. ACHD also has authority over it. So as I mentioned earlier, both entities would need to agree to that in order for it not to be extended.
Thank you.
Otherwise, if one entity required it to extend, yeah, that's what they'd be required to do with this development.
Thank you, ma'am. Bill, did you have any other follow-up there?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
If there's no other comments or questions, can I get a motion to close public hearing?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Castanelli.
I move to close public hearing for Donald subdivision H-2019-002. Am I on the right one? I'm not.
So. Yep,
Yeah.
0027.
H2019-0027.
Second.
A motion and a second to close public hearing on H-2019-0027. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, friends and neighbors, this application is properly before you. Do you have any kickoff thoughts? There's a lot to take in.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Steele.
Just looking at it, I commend the applicant on, changing the configuration. Trying to fit this thing in here and satisfy everybody has got to be a daunting task for sure. I like what they've done on the north and the west boundaries. I'm a fan of leaving the west boundary as a single story. I just think that's going to help everybody in the future as far as what the transition needs to look like in the lot that may or may not develop to the west, as well as to the people that currently inhabit it. Looking at the way it's laid out as far as the racetrack element to it, before where it was kind of a loop that went in there, and the way that it lined up, I could see what happened there, but the offset on it the way that that goes up into Delano, I mean, in and of itself, that's a bit of a traffic mitigation. I live on the corner of a through street, and having the other streets come into it at an angle is something that slows everybody down. Obviously not everybody, but most everybody that intends on obeying the law. Looking at the Alpine Point as far as it being overconnected, I mean, if we're just looking at Alpine Point, I agree with that statement, but we're looking at this subdivision, and this subdivision is going to be, if we limit it to one ingress egress and then an emergency, to me that's underconnected. I mean, that's very limiting to the people that live in there as far as the function of being able to get in and out. Being able to have some of them go north, have some of them go south is, I mean, it's healthy. As far as that's as the subdivision that we're looking at, as the development that we're looking at going in. So as much as I would personally hate to live on something that is a cul-de-sac and then have it opened up. That said, even looking at I looked at the same Google Earth Street View, and you can plainly see that the pavement goes all the way up to the fence, which is not normal. Generally, that would be a sidewalk. And there is a big red sign there indicating that that's a blocked road, even though there's a fence that separates the two pieces of property. So should there have been a sign up that said, this street to be continued in the future? More than likely, and hopefully there's not a legal recourse for that. That's one of my concerns about moving forward with this, but that'll probably play out at a different time. I did like the feedback from the individual that talked about the trees on the southwestern exposure there. I mean, if they're good, healthy trees, it'd be a good idea to try and keep them in there. I'm sure they appreciate them for privacy and everything else on that side. Other than that, I mean, we kind of got to work with what we have here. We don't really know when these other streets are going to go in and how they're going to go in. As far as connecting into the existing cul-de-sac there, it's even from the ACHD point of view, it's going to happen. That street is going to become a through. That street will connect through. And again, it's not so that Alpine Point can have more connectivity. It's so that this subdivision, this development has enough connectivity. And I think that ACHD or the city otherwise would be hard pressed to not recognize that. So, again, I like what's been done here. I know that it's probably been pretty hard to put it in. I mean, the point on the schools, I mean, you know me, I'm always willing to step up for the schools, but I know that there is another high school that's going to open up. It's scheduled to open up. Rocky Mountain High School numbers are going to come down. They have some provisions in place to open up another middle school. So, I mean, all of that is within spec. They've come a long way with everything. And I think that they've done as much as they possibly can in order to get this thing to go in.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Holland.
I think Commissioner Steele had a lot of my similar comments. I think the applicant's come a long way since the last time we saw this project. It looks like they've worked through a lot of the issues that we had with them previously. And I like the way that they've allocated the park space. I think that looks like a nice amenity for this loop. And I certainly feel for the neighbors that are up on the north side that they had a number of substreets that were planned into their community. And I understand also where the city's coming from and wanting to enforce those substreets, because even though it sounds counterintuitive, the more access points you have in a neighborhood, the less of an impact you actually feel from those access points because they're more connected. So there's kind of a catch-22 on how many you really should have. And I certainly feel for them. If I lived off Dashwood Place, I'd certainly be concerned as well about turning that in, but I think they've done what they can to try and mitigate some of the concerns of how traffic will route through there and the way that they've designed the neighborhood to come through there. Hopefully they won't see a lot of cut through traffic. And once Centerpoint Way is constructed, I think it'll be better. Again, it's unfortunate that they've got 2 points of connection that close together, and maybe once Centerpoint is is open, then Dashwood could become an emergency type access only. I'd be more comfortable if Centerpoint went through currently, but without it going through, it's tough. I see why staff and ACHD want to have that connection point. To the couple of items that they asked for amendments on, item 1D of restricting the home or not restricting the homes on the west side. I would agree. I think single family is probably a safer bet just to, protect what's going to happen in the future, but I'd be okay with them doing single story with a bonus room because those are facing forward. So maybe that's a concession we could make that gives them a little bit more room for square footage. If they're looking to add a bonus room, they're usually front facing. They don't tend to impact behind neighbors, but maybe that's an option we could throw forward for them. And then for item 2B, they wanted to remove, I don't see a big concern with them waiting to do the buffer and sidewalk on the east side of Centerpoint until the third phase, because that's when they'll start really looking into it. I'd hate to see them have to build something that has to get ripped out later. So I don't see a concern with either one of the requests that were out there. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a tough project and one that we gave a lot of thought to last time it came through to us. It's hard for some of these infill projects, and it's hard to do them exactly the way that you envision them. But I think they've done a thoughtful job of trying to hear all the concerns and trying to come up with the best route that they can come up with. That's my thoughts for now.
Additional comments? In the midstream, I think we're going to start seeing these more often as the infill discussion, especially with the new comp plan, it's prepping for that. So I think this is going to be more normal than not, and I think we're going to have to be creative because it's hard to do infill. So,
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Miss.
Commissioner
Go ahead.
We'll go next. Commissioner Grove, you can hop in next, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I like what they've done. It's night and day from what was presented last year, and I think that transition on the north, you've really only got, with the exception of that one pipe shaped lot, you've got a 2-to-1 transition pretty much there. So I think those lots are fine. And I like the comments with the trees that got it. Those are salvageable. That'd be nice. Yeah, and unfortunately, I feel for the homeowners on Dashwood, but that is a different shaped cul-de-sac. I would, if I was living there, I think I would have assumed that was going through. That being said, at some point, if and maybe it's a year down the road, maybe it's 10 years down the road, but if Centerpoint and Rogue River are connected, I think they could petition at that point to have it vacated and just see how things are going. But I agree. I mean, it's the connectivity of this subdivision that's lacking at this time. So I guess that's where I'm at on those.
Commissioner Grove, sorry, sir. Cut you off.
Good. So this is my first time seeing this, obviously, and I'm not as familiar as everybody else is with this project, so kind of coming at it with some fresh eyes. Looking back at what they proposed last time versus what they're proposing now, I see that they've made some, major adjustments. I don't have it pulled up right in front of me, but it was like 20 houses fewer than before, which in a development this size is a pretty large number to dwindle down. So I applaud them on working to address the neighborhood concerns. I like what they've done. I would echo what Ali and Sonia said about seeing if there's a way to keep those existing trees. I don't know exactly what that would look like or mean, but having mature trees definitely would enhance this project quite a bit. But other than that, I don't want to reiterate everything that has been said before, but I agree with the statements of the previous commissioners. So
thanks, sir. Commissioner Casanelli, were you getting ready to
Sure.
talk?
I think so. Is everybody, I'm not stepping on somebody's tongue here.
Go right ahead, sir.
I applaud the applicant's efforts to better transition the lots on the north. They did take them down. I know the folks there along in Alpine Point would like to see even larger lots, but I think they've done a good job there. My biggest issue, and really the only way that I think I would support this, is to go along with the and it was the applicant that actually petitioned ACHD to close off Dashwood. This isn't a huge area here with 60 something. You know, once Center Point comes out, there will be good north-south flow. I would like to see them stick with the ACHD acceptance of keeping Dashwood closed for 10 years, and that would, I think, give the opportunity to of Alpine Point residents to petition ACHD. I think eventually when Center Point punches up to Wainwright, this area is gonna have flow. They can get out eventually. Jasmine to Rogue River, I think was the name of that street. You know, as far as the pinwheel and this one, it's small enough. I don't think that that's an issue, but and then a couple other points where I like what Commissioner Holland suggested on the lots to the R8s on the west side, perhaps keep them single story, allow, I guess, a bonus up. I would be in favor of that, but again, I would want to see them following the ACHD recommendation on Dashwood to close that as emergency exit and pedestrian for 10 years or until Center Point is completed. I mean, I feel strong about that. I think it would be a lot of traffic. The people in Brickyard would be funneling out that, and I think that would be an intense burden on that street when that happens. I think the Brickyard and everything else, Hobby Lobby, all those need to be forced onto Center Point, and unless that's maintained as a emergency access, I don't see that happening. So other than that, I do like what they've done. There's been a lot of concessions, but I would want to see Dashwood remain closed to emergency and pedestrian at this time. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner Pitzer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to say that I do like that the density has been lowered. The larger lots along the northern boundary, I think, could be bigger, but they are what they are. I know 6,000, 5,600 is not making a big difference. They did lose, I believe, 3 lots is what they lost along that, or that they changed along the northern boundary. I am deeply concerned about the racetrack. I know that you took the path of least resistance, anything to stay off of Eagle Road. And where most of this traffic is coming down Center Point, I believe Center Point, from what I read, was supposed to be a mirror of Records. Records only goes down behind the commercial, as is Center Point. It does not go against any forward-facing homes when it gets to the subdivision because it turns. And I think that is what is missing here. By allowing Dashwood to go through, we're allowing the through traffic to go all the way from Ustick all the way down to McMillan. And like I said, it will take no time at all for people to figure that out and make that a thoroughfare without any calming. If the roads were to go through the subdivision in a different fashion, then I could see where you would have some calming. There is no calming with this as it is. I also think that there could be a substreet. I think that the design, I'm all for infills. I know something has to go back in there. Something will go back in there. I think this configuration is the wrong configuration for this at this time. The ACHD records that I looked at said that they can put a substreet when the Wong property eventually sells to go all the way through to Center Point. I think this is premature. I think that we have one chance at this to get it right. And I commend Ballcook for coming together with the HOA and trying to make this work, but I just see too many flaws for me to support it with the plat that's presented.
Additional comments?
Mr. Chair, it looks like Sonia might be trying to speak.
Sonia, we're hopping in there.
Mr. Chair, Sonia is not trying to speak. Thank you, though. Thank you for the eye out, though, Commissioner Holland.
It said on the top of my screen, Sonia's speaking, so sorry.
Oh,
Thought I would check with you.
I don't know why. Thank you.
I think the applicant has done a good job of balancing what everybody's trying to do. I do see where Commissioner Casanelli's point and some of the comments that have been made where the thoroughfare back there could be mitigated with other streets later on. And so I'm amenable if we want to make an emergency access. I think there's a boatload of residences in the Brickyard that will find other ways to get out. And I know that will happen. So I don't want to significantly impact the folks on whatever I can't remember that street name, the D one, excuse me, I got too many things in my head. But I do think there's got to be a way to vacate that at some point or when it's necessary. So just my thoughts. I'm good with Commissioner Holland's comments in regards to bonus up if that's something that we want to do as a kind of happy medium. But there's a lot of things that take into this and a lot of feelings that have gone around it in regards to the last year we've been doing this conversation. So I do think it's a balance between the medium density that's there and the buffer that is the Brickyard right now. I think there's trying to find something that balances and that slowly kind of brings a transition. You're not going to find very much more balance there. So it's challenging.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Yeah, I think I would be supportive of this being emergency only for the 10 years. That would give this time to, play out just a little bit more, and that the residents then could petition to vacate as other stuff opens up around there.
Mr. Chair, I think I could be open to seeing it be an emergency and pedestrian access too. I don't know if ACHD and staff would accept that, and maybe we just make that recommendation to council and let them deliberate, but I certainly see the concerns, and as long as there's enough access and they feel confident people can get in and out of there, as long as there's still at least an emergency access point with maybe bollards or something like that, where if there's a fire or whatever in the neighborhood, people can get out if needed. I'd feel more comfortable with that too.
And I think I still think they would like to have access to commercial space, and by giving them emergency and pedestrian opportunity to get through there, that won't add additional traffic, but it will give them connectivity through walking and biking. So I think it's a balance.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Commissioner.
Just on that point, one of the pieces in the staff report was regarding the pathway and how it would follow center point, I believe. But without it going all the way through, there is a lack of pedestrian walkway through this development. And so by making that an emergency access pedestrian walkway, that would help alleviate some of that walking connectivity through this infill project.
Additional comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to speak up on behalf of this vacation process that's been discussed this evening, and just be clear on the record. The city is a recommending body on vacation applications to ACHD. They're the decision makers on that sort of application. But looking at, there's 8 homes that take access off of that roadway. And there's nothing in code that would allow that road to be vacated and allow them to have access per city code. So more than likely, if the applicant was going to vacate that, city staff would not support that because we can't. Those homes need to have certain frontages and meet code and take access from a local street or access from a street, a public street. And so, and there's city utilities in that roadway that were constructed with that subdivision. So the likelihood of getting support for vacating that roadway is probably pretty minimal. It's not, probably won't happen. So I just want to be very clear on the record that there's a lot of things to take into consideration when we're talking about vacating right away. And in this particular sense, looking at what's already developed in the area, more than likely, I don't see ACHD or the city supporting that option to move forward with a vacation application. But again, thank you for your time. I just wanted to be clear on the record for that, with that request, or at least that portion of the testimony that came in tonight.
So basically you're saying you're just a buzzkill.
Yeah, I'm Debbie Downer tonight.
No, I appreciate the insight. Thank you. Commissioner Holland, go right ahead.
Mr. Chair, just a follow up for Bill. So Bill, if we made a recommendation that would become a emergency and pedestrian access rather than a vacation request, would that make it any different to you in the comment you just made?
No, I think the commission's had the appropriate testimony on that this evening, stating the findings that there is other options for connectivity in the future. ACHD has made a recommendation already to you this evening, and they've supported the applicant and the neighborhood's request to allow that to be a temporary emergency access. And certainly, in my experience with the city, yes, the council has granted those requests and has not required streets to be stepped through the developments. Now, have we paid for that? Those decisions? Yes. Those always haven't been the best decisions. We want neighborhoods to be connected. But again, as Sonia mentioned to you in her testimony, that's within your purview to make that recommendation on a city council, and they have the ultimate decision to determine whether or not that's in the best interest of the public to have that as an emergency only, or require that to be punched through.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pitzer, go right ahead, ma'am.
So if we have Dashwood as a temporary emergency, the 10 years, can we still have a substreet with an east-west egress to the north? They might lose one lot on that side, but where they have a private drive that could easily become a substreet, so they would have an additional exit for that subdivision and still keep Dashwood as a temporary.
And I think that's the concept, is as the other ones get built out, that one can stay there as a temporary, but an emergency access. And it could almost become permanent if that would be our recommendation. As other streets get built out, they have other secondary accesses that are out there.
Yeah, certainly, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
So just like Sonia spoke to you about the code, we try to limit the amount of access points to collector road as well. And the applicant's already proposing one connection point to that collector street. When that property to the west develops, certainly there is another opportunity to tie back into that neighborhood and also the Champion Park neighborhood. There's actually a stub street that will be extended with that. 2 stub streets that are stubbed to the property to the west of the property that we're discussing this evening. So we certainly have it set up in that area to where these neighborhoods will connect if it was the commission's desire not to require that to be extended at this time and have it as an emergency access only. So I don't, in my opinion, I'm not a transportation planner, but I don't think there's a need for another stub street to Center Point Way from this development. The one should be fine with the emergency access and still meet fire department code and city code.
Commissioner Pitzer, did you have any follow-up there? Or did that answer your question?
No, thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Casanelli.
If I could just get clarification from Bill, are you saying that the city would oppose if Alpine Point were to seek a permanent closure on Dashwood even after Center Point went through, if there was additional connectivity out Jasmine?
Would we oppose the connectivity? I guess I'm not following your logic.
Correct.
Commissioner, are you?
If tonight the condition is that we follow that we actually are in support of ACHD's recommendation that this become a temporary, Dashwood become a temporary emergency. So it's emergency and pedestrian only, temporarily for 10 years until Center Point goes through. If the residents of Alpine Point were to petition ACH to make that permanent, are you saying that you would oppose that? Is my question.
Well, what I was, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Casanelli, what I was speaking to, the city would not be able to support the request to vacate the right of way to prohibit the extension of that roadway.
Just a moment.
We just can't because of the infrastructure that's in there. But certainly if the city council wants to make that a permanent closure, they can certainly do that in their deliberations as it moves forward. I'm not sure if they'll have the appetite to go against what ACHD has put on the table with the 10 years. A lot can change in 10 years. Maybe the connectivity wants to be there in 10 years, given all the other properties may develop around it, and it may make sense to extend it, or 10 years from now, maybe all the roads are connected and we decide it's not warranted and they can revisit that with ACHD in 10 years from now. But either way, my point was we couldn't support the vacation of the right of way to disallow the connection of the roadway.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on one second. Bill, do you want to finish or follow up?
I just want to, not to be vacating it, but just to have it maintain that emergency access only. Or are you saying that, is that the same as vacating the right of way?
No, vacating the right of way and creating a permanent emergency access are 2 different things. Vacating the right of way means you vacate it and it becomes private property and the homeowners buy it back, and they don't have, no one has the right to use it but those who own the property. It's no longer public land, it becomes private property. We don't want to create 8 homeowners trying to determine who's going to maintain that in the future, and the city doesn't want to have to execute independent easements with 8 different property owners to have access over their sewer and water mains. It's going to get messy for us. So that's why I said vacation, in my opinion, is not an option at this point. The option is if the commission wants it to be a temporary emergency access as approved by ACHD commission, you have that authority to recommend that to city council, and city council will determine whether or not they want it to be a permanent emergency access or side with ACHD and make it have a 10-year extension on that, and we'll revisit it later at a later date, or until such time as that center point is connected. Again, we've made our recommendation to this body. Sonia was very clear that she's asked for it to be extended with the first phase, and we have to. That's what our code tells us to do. We're just doing our jobs and letting you know that it is our policy and our ordinance to require stub streets to be extended. And this is an stub street that we think needs to be extended and provide access to this development. So again, it's within your purview to make a recommendation based on the testimony that you heard this evening, and let the city council determine what the course, what decision, permanent decision they want to make on that topic.
So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's clear.
Yes, Sonia, go right ahead.
This is Sonia. I just have a follow-up to Bill's comments. So just to reiterate, as it sits today, ACHD is requiring Dashwood to eventually extend as a public street once Centerpoint goes through. If council determines that they don't want to see Dashwood extend as a public street in the future, that could be part of their approval. In which case, the applicant could possibly request to vacate from ACHD the portion of the right-of-way, which is approximately 10 feet at the terminus of the cul-de-sac. That would then allow the public utilities, the city services, to remain in Dashwood for those lots to have their street frontage and all the items that Bill mentioned. Not saying whether the city would be supportive of that, just saying that might be an option if council were determined that they didn't feel it was appropriate for Dashwood to extend in the future. So I just wanted to throw that out. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I think that, I mean, in my thought process, by giving it a 10-year, leaving it where ACHD did, it gives us a window to look at what else connects in there in 10 years. I don't want to vacate anything right now. I think by putting it as a temporary emergency access, it lets the homeowners know that there's a discussion that's taking place between the city and ACHD, and there's connections that are going to happen, hopefully, with additional development around them, and they can make a determination then, and everybody get their ducks in a row and prep for what's coming. But it doesn't, I give the applicant a ton of credit for stepping up and saying, even though this is not what I know the city wants, I'm going to do what the homeowners are asking me to do, and that is to make that road Dashwood an emergency access for this period of time. Like, it gives us a snapshot window.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Pitzer.
Mr. Chair.
1 second, or Commissioner Castelli. Commissioner Pitzer, go right ahead.
Thank you. So
No,
sorry about that. So I was just looking at.
No, I was just, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. The Zebulon Heights #2, it looked like on the city council, from what I'm looking at, it looked like ACHD approved Dashwood as a cul-de-sac, and that the city of Meridian City Council back in 2009 wanted the Dashwood to be a street so that it would not landlock the southern parcel. So in answer to that, there was no instruction there to add signage like it did on Rogue River. But it looks like they wanted to have that connectivity so that that parcel would not be landlocked when Jasmine Street was vacated. So
that's in alignment with what Bill and Sonia have outlined. That's the
yeah, correct.
city wants
Yeah.
to connect things. And
Yeah, correct. I was just saying I found that in the
that
record.
makes sense. Good texture. Thank you very much for that. That's great information. Commissioner Holland, did you have anything you wanted to, I think you kept trying to talk a couple times. I cut you off. I apologize.
No, I'm good. I think Commissioner Castanelli had something to share. I'm ready to attempt making a motion, but I'll wait till everybody's done discussing first.
Yeah, Commissioner Castanelli, go right ahead. I cut you off, sir.
Well, I was also going to attempt to make a motion, but
go for it, man.
Commissioner Holland is if what's that?
Go for it. If you got it, go for it.
I think she raised her hand first, but
okay.
I'll give it a go. See how it sounds. So after considering all staff, applicant, public testimony, I move to recommend approval to the City Council file number H-2019-0027 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of April 16th, 2020, with the following modifications. Number one, that we recommend to City Council to follow ACHD's approval on the connection of Dashwood as a temporary emergency access with pedestrian connection until Centerpoint Way is extended to Wainwright or within 10 years, whichever occurs first. Maintain the single-story lots on the homes on the west side. I'm okay with eliminating condition 2D to finish. I believe that's the one to finish to curb and gutter the east side of Centerpoint until such time as the multifamily is developed in phase 3, and also work with want to phrase it right on the trees, that the applicant would work to keep as many of the mature trees along Jasmine on the southern portion as possible.
I think that the 2B Bravo is the one for to eliminate the need for the stuff on Centerpoint Way as it comes up on the east side. And there is already something in that discusses the trees. Basically, I mean, in layman's terms, it just says whatever's not cut down for firewood should be gone through with the city mitigation standards, which is all we can impress on that anyway.
Mr. Chair and Bill, did you want to allow them to do bonus rooms on the west side in your motion, or did you want them only to be single story?
I heard some additional feedback on that after I said something to that effect.
I think that was
I would be amenable to suggesting bonus rooms
Second.
on those.
Sonia and Bill, do you have a good handle on what just got laid out?
Chairman, commissioners, this is Sonia. If I could just reiterate the motions so to make sure I understand.
Yes, ma'am, please do.
You're in agreement with ACHD's approval on Dashwood and Centerpoint. You want the homes along the west boundary to be restricted to single story, but allowed a bonus room. And I would like clarification whether that means no second story windows on the back. I assume it does. Clarification on that, please. and defer the buffer and the sidewalk on the east side of Center Point to phase 3 as requested by the applicant, and to retain as many of the existing trees as possible along the southern boundary.
Does the motion maker, you want to clarify on the no windows in the bonus room from the back? Was that what your intention was?
That is my intention, as Sonia laid that out.
Okay. Does the seconder agree?
No windows on the back with bone.
Sure.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of file number H2019-0027 with modifications. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, team. Sonia, thank you for walking us through that. That was a intense one, so we appreciate it. Heath, thank you for being here and for your input, and good luck. And on that, I hope everybody's healthy and safe, and we appreciate all you're doing, and please stay that way. And I need one more motion.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn the public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission of April 16th, 2020.
Second.
Sounds good. I have a motion and a second to adjourn the public meeting, or adjourn the hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Thanks all.
Thank you, commissioners.